Hello and welcome to another episode of For Zion's Sake, the CUFI UK podcast. My name is Alex and I'm joined here by Alastair.
Hello.
And this week we're looking at the serious incidents that took place in Amsterdam, which was a modern-day pogrom. It's been depicted by the media as football hooliganism, but we go into the details and explain that Jews were chased down on the streets of a European city and were fearing for their lives. We also talk about how this could happen in other European cities.
That's right. Plus, we discuss the resignation of Archbishop Welby and recap some of his previous unbiblical comments about Israel and ask the question whether or not it had any impact.
Yeah, we're also going to be reading some of your comments and answering some questions. So if you have any questions or comments about this week's topics, please do let us know in the comment section down below.
So, Alex, let's begin with the events in Amsterdam last week.
Yep.
Scenes that we didn't think we would be seeing on the streets of a city in Europe.
Yeah.
Where Israelis and Jewish people were attacked in the streets of Amsterdam. I mean, it was absolutely shocking what took place.
Yeah.
And also shocking has been some of the responses.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's so much to talk about. Where do we start? Should we give an overview?
Let's just give a snapshot of what took place. So
what we saw was a football match between Maccabi Tel Aviv and the Dutch giants Ajax taking place in Amsterdam. And from what we can tell, actually, there wasn't much problems going on during the match or even after the match. Ajax are known as the Super Jews, as they call themselves. They sing chants which include "We're not from here, we're from Tel Aviv."
Is that right?
Yep.
Is that right? That's really interesting.
Yeah.
And so actually there wasn't really much trouble between the two sets of fans.
No, in fact, before the game, they were filmed all together, Ajax fans and Maccabi Tel Aviv fans, with Israel flags, singing together, being happy together.
Which is remarkable because
you wouldn't have seen that in the news.
No,
it's definitely there.
We did not see that in the news. When we use the word football hooliganism, and we don't condone football hooliganism, and we can say that as English fans, right? So we do not condone it. And there's been problems of football hooliganism over the course of history. But football hooliganism is usually between two sets of fans that have some rivalry or some bitterness between one another, and things can sometimes get quite ugly.
Yeah.
But what you're just describing isn't football hooliganism between two sets of fans. No. In fact, it isn't even hooliganism at all, right?
Well, yeah.
And yet that was the word which was used very much so in the news reports last week.
Yeah, and I think it painted that picture to the majority of people who don't attend football matches, because let's be honest, the majority of people don't actually go to football. And even people who do go to football, me and you both have been to football matches in our lifetime. We're both avid supporters of different football teams. And, I remember the first time I went to a football match, I was actually under the impression that all football fans, not all, obviously, but like there was a big number of hooligans. You had to be wary, that sort of thing. Why? Because I was told that by family members and friends and stuff. Be careful when you go to a football match. The opposite is true, though, in my experience of it. So my experience going to football matches is they're very friendly environments. There's lots of families there, children, and it's the majority, the vast majority of people who are at football matches are there to enjoy the football, enjoy the game, because they love their team and they love the game. And I think that's what was the case in Amsterdam. There were 3,000 Maccabi Tel Aviv fans who went to Amsterdam. Before the game, if you go onto the Maccabi Tel Aviv website, they had information explaining about the friendship between Ajax and between Maccabi Tel Aviv. They gave travel advice, and actually the travel advice was, you don't really need to worry too much because Ajax likes us and we're friendly. But there was an undercurrent of, you do need to be careful because there are, possibilities that maybe there's going to be a pro-Palestinian protest and people outside of the football match who might interfere and cause some problems.
And that was the problem.
Yeah.
Because one of the reports that, or many reports, highlighted the fact that some of the Israeli fans tore down Palestinian flags.
Yeah.
Right? Now, hang on a minute. A Palestinian team was not even playing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So, why were the Palestinian flags in the area?
Yeah.
Why? Because they wanted to incite and provoke these football fans.
Yeah.
And just imagine an event, a Palestinian event of any kind, a sporting event, okay? Let's say there was the Palestinian team, because there is a team that plays international football. Just imagine someone has surrounded the whole area with Israel flags. But just imagine, okay? We'd quite like to see Israel flags, right?
Yep.
But it would be considered to be a deliberate attempt to provoke those people, okay?
Yeah.
And this, the big difference is that the flag of Israel is the flag of an independent state, a country which exists and has been and is the symbol of democracy, a symbol of hope, and a symbol of what's right. And I'm sorry, but the Palestinian flag, which is used particularly in this context, is one which is to actually attack and undermine Israelis and to offend.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, I mean, with the flag, yes, it's wrong that people tear down flags. It's private property, it's vandalism, it's criminal offence. I know. I mean, if we want to talk about our personal history going to an Israeli football match where we saw some Palestinian flags, we had that discussion.
We had the discussion, and
one of us was a bit more reasonable than
one of us. It crossed their minds, and then one of us decided. But anyway, let's move on from that. But we have been to football match involving Israel.
Yeah, and there was a big intimidation factor. There were pro-Palestinian protesters, agitators. You know, there was heavy security for the Israeli fans and so forth. And I mean, it is a sort of troubling thing. I mean, the great thing, the game we went to actually was Israel versus Wales.
Yes.
And, you know, we stood there, we were watching from the Israeli side, we were in the Israeli stands, but outside the stadium, we were walking around, we bought some scarves and things, and we stood next to the Palestinian protesters, and pretty much every Welsh person walking past them just kept saying to them, get lost, in not so nice terms, keep politics out of football, you're not welcome here, all that stuff. And that was actually really good to see. But anyway, side note.
I mean, I should just say, we did have the discussion. We saw this Palestinian flag in a place it shouldn't have been, and we said, should we move it?
Well, one of us said, should we move it? And the other said,
no,
absolutely no.
That's full disclosure about what happened. But what happens in Cardiff stays in Cardiff, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So
but going back to Amsterdam, you know, it's like, yes, there's a video of 3 men or 4 men maybe, where one of them's on the shoulders of the other pulling down the Palestinian flag. Criminal offence. Obviously, they're provoked. Again, there was another video of some fans, one of the fans on top of a building pulling it down.
Yes.
Well, that's 2 flags that got pulled down by a handful of people. There were 3,000 fans there.
Yes.
Again, there's a video which I saw. It's a 17-minute long video. People can go and watch it online. It's by a YouTube channel called Bender, Bender. So it's in Dutch, but it is translated into English. And it's literally like a 17-year-old journalist who goes to football matches and protests and things and films. And he probably does better reporting than any other journalist sort of thing. And what he's doing is he's following the Maccabi fans. So he is showing the badness of what the Maccabi fans did. By the way, just so you know, we are looking at the negatives right now of what the Maccabi fans did. Bearing in mind, none of what I'm saying justifies any of the aftermath of this. Yeah. But the way the media tried to paint it was all the Maccabi fans. They did all this taunting, all the rest of it. So going back to the Maccabi fans, you know, there was a group of them. Could have been 100, could have been 50. I don't know exactly how many is on the video. I didn't count. But they are together as a group. There is clearly some provocations going on. The reporter's actually saying there's a load of taxis beeping their horns at them. There's apparently there was WhatsApp groups where the different pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel groups were posting messages saying they're on this street, go to here. There was a pro-Palestinian protest taking place. There were fireworks being fired over. And so to defend themselves, this group of what could have been the ultras of the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans, equipped themselves with some weapons, picked up some stones, picked up a bar off, like a metal bar from a construction site, that sort of thing, in preparation of being attacked, because there was another group that were provoking them off camera. And actually the reporter kept saying repeatedly, I don't know who the other group is. They're, because they're unidentifiable, because they were just wearing black and that sort of thing. So there's clearly this confrontation going on. There was about 2 police vans there trying to stop the fans doing stuff. There was 1 or 2 scuffles between these 2 opposing groups. And then eventually the fans are kettled in by the police. More police arrive. They take them away onto buses and they ship them out. So that's the provocations and what happened between the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans. But it looked like it was the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans responding to provocations and things. I mean, there was even an attempt by a taxi driver to run over a couple of them at certain points. So that's how the media sort of depicted it. It was, these, hooligans came in, started ripping up the town and caused all this problem. And as a response, other fans, attacked them. That is not the case.
No.
There's evidence of the WhatsApp groups where they're saying 2 or 3 days before, be on the lookout for Jews, be on the lookout for Tel Aviv fans, put up Palestinian flags, provoke them into certain areas, we'll be ready to attack them, all these different things. And it worked. The handful of fans who were there, part of the ultras, fell for the trap and were idiots for doing that. Let's be real. So all I'm trying to do is, even though I've been negative going on about the Maccabi fans for a while, I just want to point out there were thousands of Maccabi fans there. They interacted with the Ajax fans amicably. They celebrated together, that kind of thing. After the game, the Ajax fans went home. Most of the Maccabi fans went home. There was a small dispute between the Maccabi Tel Aviv ultras, or what I can tell as being the ultras, and another force coming in there trying to have a fight. The police took away the ultras, and then the other group of people that were still there, who I assume were, well, we know that some of them were from the Moroccan community, different Arab and Muslim communities, and pro-Palestinian communities, and they were there for a fight, not to, it wasn't a protest. They were there to hurt people.
Yeah. Because to me, it seems that it was more premeditated. Than simply reacting to the actions of the Maccabi fans. And looking at some of the footage of football fan families, football fans with children being chased down the street. Right. This was not just a mob, violence. This was targeted attacks. Attempted targeted attacks as well. And I heard stories of Israeli fans trying to escape the area, calling down taxis. And the taxi driver, one particular man said that the taxi driver, whose name was Mohammed, asked, "Are you Jewish?" And when the fan said yes, they drove off.
Exactly.
Right? So this was a widespread. There were also these pro-Palestinian mobs that were deliberately trying to find Israelis and asking, "Are you Jewish?" Right. So this was anti-Semitic. This wasn't This was not about football. This was not even about hooliganism. This was an anti-Semitic, pogrom, as it has been described as. But it was anti-Semitism, and I think the media has failed. And a number of media channels, when I say, Sky News was one of them, BBC, which really did not paint the true picture.
Exactly. Because I think even with what I'm saying, it's like I don't want people to think, oh, I'm excusing the actions that happened against the Israeli fans, because actually it is inexcusable what happened after that. And actually, like you said, it was premeditated. Days before the game, they were planning these attacks. They had bought fireworks. They had said to put up Palestinian flags. Like you said, with the taxi drivers, there was one taxi driver who did take the Israeli fans, took them to the hotel, dropped them off at the hotel, then messaged his friends saying, right, I've just dropped them off at this hotel. And then a group of Palestinian protesters or anti-Israel protesters broke into the hotel hunting for the Jews inside the hotel. There was another story here. There's so there's actually a lady here, Esther Voet, who's actually editor-in-chief of a local Jewish newspaper in Amsterdam. She saw the news on TV, saw what was happening, so she went in her car, drove into the area, picked up some Maccabi Tel Aviv fans who were, hiding there, and drove them to her house and kept them there. And she said that, she had a number of frightened people, some of them teenagers. They had horrible stories to tell. They were really very, very scared. And so I told them, this is a Jewish home. You're safe here. So she actually held several people in her house until police came and took them to their hotel room. Yeah. And, they could hear violence going on outside, fireworks exploding. And she said, I never thought I would go through this. It felt like a pogrom. Yeah. She literally said that. And this is a Jewish woman who lives in Amsterdam hiding Jews in her home.
Yes.
And
the king of the Netherlands had made a strong statement, and he said, "We failed the Jewish community of the Netherlands during World War II, and last night we failed again." And I think that just hits home the seriousness of what took place, and also how the Jewish people in Amsterdam must be feeling. I mean, this, as we've said, this goes beyond football hooliganism. This is anti-Semitism being played out on our streets. It is unacceptable. I think the Dutch people have responded in a very sympathetic way towards what has happened. I've seen pictures of Christians in Holland that have been gathering in the public squares. In Amsterdam, praying on the streets, singing on the streets, and with Israel flags, chanting, pro-Israel chants in order to show solidarity with the Jewish people in Holland. And that response. So I think there are many Dutch people who are absolutely horrified by what has taken place, and I think shows a worrying a worrying indication, really, of some of the deep-rooted problems that are in a major European city, where a demographic of largely Muslim and pro-Arab groups that are easily provoked by the presence of Jews in the city. I think that is a very worrying sign, because this could be any European city. It could also be London. And so I hope that there are lessons which are learned. Security certainly has to be paramount with any sporting events involving an Israeli team now, and it clearly was lacking on last week. But it is very, very sad that even has to be considered. I mean, there's always a need for security, right, in these big events, but to think that it is needed on a city scale.
I know, this isn't
very worrying.
Exactly, because normally it's the stadium and the fans around the stadium which are needing the protection. But actually, this went far beyond that. It went over multiple days, multiple nights. It went over multiple locations as well.
Yes.
These were hotels being attacked. These were... I mean, I just want to highlight some of the attacks.
Could I just say, it's easily mobilized as well.
Yes, exactly,
Because this is not just a flare-up of one group of, and they were mainly young men, so young men who are inflamed, right? This was an easily a mobilized
Yeah.
situation, which also I think is a concern.
Yeah. And I think as well, what you're saying there is it wasn't like, right, here's a group of fans, you can tell they're the aggressor versus another group. Yeah. We've seen it where two rival fans groups attack each other. This was, Jews who were fearing for their lives, who couldn't trust anyone.
And being hunted down.
They were being hunted down. Like, they couldn't trust the taxi drivers to take them to a hotel. They couldn't trust anyone.
Yes.
And so you had it where some of them were hiding in restaurants, some of the people, because obviously after the football match, you go off and you go to the pub, you go have a meal, you go to a hotel, you do whatever, and so several hours later, some of these people had gone to a restaurant, they were then walking home, and then suddenly they were getting beaten up. And it was, some of the attacks are horrific. It is, 20 people beating up one person. Yes. One person got thrown onto a train tracks after being literally punched and kicked by about maybe 30 people, including children. They're indoctrinating their children to hate Jews.
Yes.
There was a video of someone filming themselves saying, we're on a Jew hunt while driving in their car, went onto the curb and ran someone over in his car while filming it himself. There was videos of people who had just been knocked out cold, were on the floor unconscious, and then repeatedly being kicked in the head. And most of the victims did not have anything visible about them which showed them as being Jewish, but maybe they had spoken in Hebrew or something like that, and they got hurt, or they had been followed by someone. And these were sort of vigilante mobs of, and it was hundreds of them, but it was groups of 10 or 20 here and there.
Yes.
Who would spot a
heard
victim.
That the groups had been were in sort of well organized groups of 300. So there was something which was taking place, which was actually quite pre-planned.
Yeah, it was definitely pre-planned. It was definitely nothing to do with the football. They just knew these fans are going to be either Jewish or they're going to be Israeli. But ultimately, it's because of anti-Semitism. Yes. It was a pogrom. We cannot put it any way simpler than that. And by the way, just like what happened with October 7th, and I will say the same spirit of anti-Semitism that was there on October 7th, the same hatred, the same bloodlust. There was a lust for violence and blood. Yeah. It was horrific what happened. It's the same spirit as what happened October 7th in Amsterdam, same thing. Like, they are the same spirit.
And the same one as Kristallnacht as well.
Yeah, same one as
that was last week was the anniversary of Kristallnacht, and here we are in Europe. That same anti-Semitic spirit.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. And there's another incident actually. It was on the 11th, so just this week, and it was Kristallnacht, I think, was the 9th to the 10th, was it? So it was the day after, and actually there was a tram that was set on fire. People smashed windows of it. It was the tram was empty, but it was obviously an anti sort of government sort of thing by pro-Palestinian protesters. They put up flags, and the thing they were chanting was whatever the Dutch word is for cancer Jews.
Wow.
So it wasn't cancer Israelis, even, it was cancer Jews. And again, this is the day after the Jewish people commemorated Kristallnacht. There were attacks on random Jewish people throughout Europe because, again, like in October 7th, when Hamas carried out their attacks, we've spoken about this before on the podcast, it invigorated the anti-Semites around the world to attack Jews.
Yes.
There was a greater number of anti-Semitic attacks directly following October 7th before Israel responded. And the same thing happened here. There was a video of a Swedish Jewish boy leaving his apartment, getting beaten up by a group of other boys because he was Jewish. There's been a spike of anti-Semitic attacks after this around Europe, maybe even around the world. There's been some attacks in New York I've seen as well. And people need to realize, this is a spiritual warfare. This is anti-Semitism, and this can happen anywhere. It can happen in Amsterdam, in London, in New York, anywhere.
Yes,
because we are not dealing with the hatred that is behind this.
Yes, no, I absolutely agree with you, and it just highlights really the fact that this was not just about football hooliganism. Like, this is a targeted attack, anti-Semitic attack, and it could have been. It really actually could have been any event as well, which Israelis and Jews were present at, which is why it is really important, and this is what we at CUFI stand for, is that we show our support to the Jewish community. We want to see Israeli teams come and play football in Europe. And I know that there's going to be a lot of reviewing of security for those events. But also we want the Jewish community to know that they are not alone. And so what took place in Amsterdam, I know many Christians that are in Holland, this was not done in their name. This was not done in our name. And I think we understand that there are some very serious cultural clashes that have to be addressed. Like what took place cannot happen again. And so let's pray that the Jewish community will be protected in European cities, throughout the world, of course. But it is a sad reality of the times that we are living in. But we should probably now move on to another topic. Shall we read some comments? We appreciate all of the comments that were provided since the last podcast, and we always appreciate reading them. So thank you very much for everyone that has commented. Please remember that if you would like to share your thoughts about today's podcast, about the things we're talking about, then we invite you to leave a comment below. But first of all, thank you very much for all the kind comments from those who enjoyed the podcast. Thank you very much. We have a couple of comments, which was, if you remember, President Trump was elected as the new, we can't forget, can we? But if you remember the last podcast, we discussed about President Trump being elected as the new or the next US president. And Gerald has said, "Hi guys, with regards to President Trump moving the embassy to Jerusalem, it was my understanding that Liz Truss, during her ill-fated short period as PM, also declared her intention to move the British embassy to Jerusalem, something that didn't endear her to certain anti-Semites." That's absolutely true. That would have been a great statement for our country, especially with regard to Genesis 12 verse 3. 100% agree that would have been a real bold and correct statement for our country to make. It still is, or it still would be. And you're absolutely right. Liz Truss, during her campaign, did articulate her desire to review where the British embassy is located, with the proposal that it should be in Jerusalem, Israel's capital, and not Tel Aviv. And at the time, it received a huge backlash from a lot of very left-wing, self-important journalists and academics that wrote a long appeal to the government. And also, interestingly, by the head of the Church of England and head of the Catholic Church in Britain, both of whom, Archbishop Welby representing, of course, leading the Church of England, who came out strongly against and advised against moving the embassy. And all of this happened very, very quickly, and it was still on the table when Liz Truss became Prime Minister. And of course, she was not in number 10 for very long. And it was very, very sad, but it would have been a bold move. Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of the time when people think of Liz Truss, they think of her as a failure, that she was an economic disaster, whatever it was that the media painted her as. To be honest with you, I don't really know too much about that kind of thing because I don't follow politics in that way. But one thing I would say is I do wonder if the animosity towards her, the attacks against her, were a spiritual thing because of her stance on Jerusalem. Because
some of the things that she's proposed, which she proposed and was ousted for, actually we're seeing take place now with our current government in terms of the borrowing and spending and stuff like that. So I don't think she was really ousted on finances, as the media portrayed it and as it was portrayed in Parliament. I actually do think there is a spiritual element to it, and I do think there was a massive backlash to when she said she might move the embassy.
Yes.
And actually, if we look at the state of Britain now, from when she took office, I would say our relationship between the UK and Israel has diminished massively compared to when she was in office. It's diminished massively compared to when even Boris Johnson was in office. And actually, we've had a downward turn in terms of, that relationship between Israel and the UK. And as, the commenter said, Genesis 12 verse 3, I'll bless those who bless you, I'll curse those who curse you. Actually, there could be some correlation there.
Well, I certainly think that what Liz Truss was advocating was perceived to be a massive shake-up economically. And of course, there was a big reaction to that from the financial sector. And that's what she will be known for. And of course, yet the real big shake-up would have been this.
Yeah.
And that shaking was rumbling before she was confirmed as being the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
And so I think, yes, whilst she was obviously brought down for the things which are visible, it was actually the things which were invisible, I think, when it came to the spiritual implication that would have been.
Yeah.
And she was quite forthright in sort of suggesting that was part of her wish, was to really reconsider it. There has not been a Prime Minister in our lifetime, and that has voiced that wish for Jerusalem to be recognised as the capital of Israel. It would have been absolutely historic. And I also think that the interesting thing with... actually we'll come on to that with the next comment, if we might, because I've read them. I know what's coming.
Yeah.
Andrew says, hopefully with Trump being more supportive of Christians, let's hope it changes a few things in the UK as well as Europe. From the videos of Harris, I personally don't believe she would have been supportive. Every time America has been strong, it seems to have influence on the UK and others. I think that's a very good point, because I do think that even with Liz Truss, even her voicing that was inspired, I think, by the United States' decision to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And when President Trump was in the White House in his first term, you will note that, or you'll recall, in fact, that he was very, very strong against bias at the United Nations, bias against Israel at the United Nations.
Yeah.
If you remember, him and Nikki Haley, who was the US ambassador to the UN at the time, they actually brought the US out of UNESCO because of its bias against Israel, and other pressures as well to try and get rid of anti-Israel bias. And at that same time, Britain under Boris Johnson, who was Foreign Secretary at the time of when Donald Trump was in the White House, and he basically addressed the problem of Britain that was abstaining every time at the UN on issues where Britain should have actually been opposing resolutions which were anti-Israel.
Yeah.
And he basically changed it so that it was on a case-by-case basis, but the default would not be to abstain.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, we actually voted in favour of Israel more.
Yeah.
Now, that was just you might say it's a small thing. It is actually a big thing. But it might not be widely known, right? But that happened because, I believe it happened because of the change of atmosphere towards, between our alliance towards Israel.
Yeah.
And so I do think that this potentially, President Trump as if he continues on this pro-Israel support, which we pray that he will do, could have some impact on the United Kingdom, some influence on the UK and others. The question is whether or not our new government will be receptive to wanting to receive that influence.
Yeah, exactly.
One thing, though, I do think could happen is that whilst we can hold out hope that Britain will have some sort of pro-Israel reformation, the British government will have some kind of pro-Israel reformation, that would be miraculous, and that would be what we are praying for. It would be a win, I think, even if the current government changed the dial slightly away from being, quite anti to perhaps being marginally more favourable. I mean, that would be that would be progress, and it could be a slight dial change that a pro-Israel US government is able to effect a resistance in a way that might prevent Britain thinking they can get away with, for example, introducing more arms embargo. It might just hold it back a little bit.
Well, I hope so, because I mean, from CUFI's perspective, we do, we are apolitical. Whatever the word is, we're non-partisan, so we support actions rather than people. So with Liz Truss, we actually supported her announcement of it. We welcomed it and we said that's great. And so we wanted to see that happen. When it came to Boris Johnson, he said that they would vote no rather than abstain. We supported that action, and actually there was one where he abstained still, and we held him to account on it. And we had a campaign saying, you have to keep your word, that sort of thing. So we hold people to account in that way, and I think the same is with Labour. It's like Labour is the government. We're praying for Labour. We hope they will stand with Israel, but unfortunately, the actions they've taken have been, I think, catastrophic to the Israel-UK relationship, or at least damaging. And so what we want to see is them to turn to be more pro-Israel. The Trump effect, is, I think, that there will be more pro-Israel support. There'll be, we're seeing shifts already. There are announcements. Hamas, for example, announced almost immediately after he was elected that they want to have a peaceful resolution. Apparently, other groups have put out messaging with similar things. I think it was even Germany said they would stop buying oil from Russia and they would buy oil from somewhere else. There's like these shifts that have happened where Trump's basically come in saying, we're going to sanction you for this, we're going to stop you doing this, and people are reacting in a positive way to what we would see it as for security for the West and security for Israel.
Yes, I think with Hamas it's probably out of fear.
Oh yeah,
because I don't believe I don't know if you noticed, I don't believe everything Hamas say.
No.
But it will be very interesting to see how that dynamic changed.
Yeah.
I read one article which was giving all of the responses from Israel's enemies.
Yeah.
And then it mentioned Hamas, and then it said, meanwhile, Iran hasn't yet commented. Right? And it was like, okay, they're just keeping quiet. Let's hope that no one notices them at the moment.
Yeah.
However, people have noticed them because it came to light over the weekend that, in fact, there has been or there was a plot sponsored by the Iranian regime to assassinate Donald Trump prior to him being elected, and that was exposed. Iran has denied it, but arrest has been made, and that plot was quite developed, apparently.
Yeah.
So I think we should be thankful that that plot did not come to fruition.
Yep.
That it was exposed. The FBI exposed it. But a continual reminder that we need to pray for his protection.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think it also shows the extended arm of the Iranian regime, which is the world's largest sponsor of terrorism.
Yeah, exactly. And I think they will be looking at Trump's election as a negative for them. It will hopefully thwart them in their plans. There's probably going to be harder sanctions on them, bearing in mind under Trump, the Iranian economy was heavily impacted by the sanctions, which were removed under Joe Biden. And so there is a knock-on effect there.
Yeah.
going back also to some of the sort of pro-Israel moves that Trump's made already, there's been 3 people he's elected or appointed, that's the word. He's appointed into his administration. So, for example, Senator Marco Rubio is going to serve as the Secretary of State. Governor Mike Huckabee is to serve as the US ambassador to Israel, and Representative Elise Stefanik is going to serve as the US ambassador to the UN. And actually, they, CUFI in America have welcomed these appointments because they are 3 people who are known to be very pro-Israel. Marco Rubio, for example, there's a great video of him being sort of accosted by Code Pink activists, and they're saying, will you condemn Israel's actions for, what they're doing in Gaza? And he actually stopped and said, I do have something to say. I hope Israel completely annihilates Hamas and they defeat them entirely, and they do everything they can to bring their people home. He says that sort of message. I'm not quoting him word for word, but it was like a very much against what they stood for. And actually that was one of their biggest videos, sort of thing. And actually it's completely the wrong message they wanted to get out there. And again, Mike Huckabee is someone who is a friend of Israel. He's actually supportive of Judea and Samaria being the land of Israel, which we agree with because it is the biblical heartland of Israel, and that includes the entirety of Jerusalem as well. So, so they're good appointments, I think, and hopefully they will, carry on the same legacy as people like Pompeo and Haley and so forth from the first Trump administration. Well, that's our prayer. So moving on to our final topic, we have already mentioned Justin Welby, the former Archbishop of Canterbury, because we've just heard the news that he has resigned. We mentioned him earlier regarding in the context of the proposed move of the embassy to Jerusalem and the way in which he came out to criticize that and came out to oppose it. And, we have highlighted the Archbishop's track record before on this podcast about, the concerning direction he's taken towards Israel. It was only, I think it was earlier in September that we highlighted the statement that he had made showing support for the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice, in which he said, quote, that it is definitively clear that Israel's presence in the occupied Palestinian territories is unlawful and needs to end as rapidly as possible. So he was effectively calling for the Israeli sovereignty over central parts of the Jewish homeland, ancestral homeland, to withdraw from it, including Jerusalem. Including Jerusalem, including
East Jerusalem,
all of that,
which is where all the holy sites are located, right? And so we highlighted that, and look, we said, God is not going to bless that position. And the Bible does say that anyone who tries to, that Jerusalem is a heavy stone, and anyone that tries to heave it away will be cut into pieces. Now, that is quite strong, and it should be pointed out that his resignation comes on the back of a scandal that is not related to this issue, but there have been a number of things where Christians have been questioning the biblical standpoint that he had, or the unbiblical standpoint he's been taking. And this is one of those very questionable things, and we have been quite outspoken, hoping that the Archbishop will have changed his position, but he is now no longer the leader of the Church of England. Yeah, exactly. And you're right. Like, his statements were completely unbiblical in regards to Israel. He was trying to divide up the land, and unfortunately, there's a number of different stances that he has taken which are unbiblical. And obviously, we focus on Israel, so we're looking at the Israel factor in all these different things. But when you look at the way he's acted in terms of some of the unbiblical things, which I think a lot of Christians are sort of concerned about, and even in his resignation letter, a lot of what he's saying is kind of to
please the world rather than please God. He only mentions, Jesus at the very end. He only mentions his faith in that regard at the very end.
Yeah.
It's what I think's happened is he's tried to please the world instead of God the whole time through. He's saying the thing that's politically correct. He's saying the woke stuff, there that, goes against the Bible and all the rest of it. And ultimately, this looks far worse for him than if he had just been biblical. You know what I'm saying? Like in the world's eyes, I'm saying.
I mean, well, it is. It's that appeasing the world, which is a part of compromise.
Yeah.
I've just written an article for our next Torch magazine, and it is about Jerusalem, about the world's attitude towards Jerusalem, how it treats God's chosen city, and I include within it a section about the Archbishop of Canterbury, who, since having written it earlier this week, I now need to edit it, as he is now former Archbishop. But I make the point that according to the scripture in Zechariah, it says that I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all peoples. That's God.
Yep.
Doesn't say that Jerusalem will be a heavy stone. It says, I will make it one.
Yeah.
So Jerusalem's heaviness is God's prerogative. It is God's will. It's God's decision that Jerusalem should, for many, be heavy.
Yeah.
And what Justin Welby tried to do was to make Jerusalem not heavy.
Yeah.
By proposing that it is split in two.
Yeah.
And by proposing that what Israel's enemies regard as being the problem, and that's a Jewish presence in Jerusalem, is removed.
Yeah.
But actually it's God's will and purpose that it should be heavy. And as Christians, we should be supporting the fact that Jerusalem is heavy for Israel's enemies, and not trying to compromise. And I think this is one of the things that on issues relating to beyond Israel as well, is that when wilderness occupies the church, leaders will think that they have to compromise in order for what is right to not be a stumbling block.
Yeah.
And Welby could see that Jerusalem is a stumbling block for those who don't have it right biblically in Israel.
Yeah.
If you are preaching the word of God, the truth will be a stumbling block for many.
Yeah.
Many Christians find the issue of Israel to be a heavy stone, a stumbling block for them. And yet, Welby's actions have sort of kind of been trying to ease it so that more people can be comfortable with a compromised position.
Yeah.
And that's not the will of God.
Not at all.
Because it's actually when we understand what God says, it's actually not a burden at all. It's tremendously liberating.
Yeah.
It's liberating as Christians that we know that Jerusalem, though it is, it is viewed by the world as being some political heavyweight. What to do about the situation with Jerusalem, with the Israelis and Palestinians. They view it as heavy. But when we understand what God says about Jerusalem, a city which he has inscribed his own name on, a city that he loves above all the cities of Judah, it is Zion that that he loves. And so as Christians we should love Jerusalem too. Love it as being what God says it is, the capital city of the Jewish people. So Justin Welby isn't the Archbishop anymore, and we might discern what we might discern into what is actually behind that. But we must now pray for the next leader of the Church of England, the next Archbishop of Canterbury, because whether you are an Anglican or not, I think we would all recognise that the head of the church, the leader of the Church of England, does have a significant influence upon the culture of this country and upon the spiritual climate of this country. and how the local church relates to the authority and leadership that the Archbishop holds.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, looking at the sort of, like you said, they do have an impact on the culture, and we would hope that they are a positive impact, a godly impact on the culture. And I think, I don't think it's a good situation when the leader of the church is agreeing with the popular culture of the time, where they're, bending biblical truth to suit the world. They're changing what they, and it might just be like ignorance, it might be naivety, foolishness, or just a lack of understanding. Whatever it was that caused him to go against biblical truth, there was some compromise being made. And I think it's, when the church is indistinguishable from the world, it's lost its flavor, it's lost its purpose. It's like,
it's lost its soul.
Lost its soul, yeah, exactly. And it's, righteousness exalts a nation. We have to be salt and light. We have to shine light on the darkness. We have to be a flavor, a salty flavor. Like if salt loses its flavor, it becomes worthless, right? And so it's that kind of thing where actually if the church is at odds with the world, that's normally a good thing. It's not a bad thing. And so we do need to pray that there will be a godly man to, come in there, lead the church and bring it back to the Bible. Because right now, unfortunately, the Church of England is, in my mind, far away from where it should be. Yeah, so we really need to pray that the next leader of the Church of England is someone who is salt and light and brings the church back into alignment with the Word of God.
Absolutely. Well, it highlights the need for this nation to get back on track regarding Israel. The Bible says that God blesses those that bless Israel, and those that curse Israel will be cursed. So that's a really serious warning for this nation, politically, as well as, the Church of England, and for all institutions, okay? When it comes to the Bible, God has not changed. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so at CUFI, we are very blessed to be doing what we're doing, but we recognize that it is so important that we raise the banner of truth in this nation at this time. We need to speak the truth regarding Israel. We need to speak out and condemn anti-Semitism wherever we see it. And we need to show our support for the Jewish community. We want to thank you that you are standing with CUFI. With your help, with your support, we are able to make an impact for this nation. And as we pray for our leaders, we must recognize that it is the Bible that is the foundation of why we stand with Israel. Thank you for your support. There is an opportunity to help us to do more and to be more effective in what we do. And to help CUFI do more, please visit www.cufi.org.uk/donate, and you will see there opportunities to give a one-off donation or to set up a regular donation and become a partner with CUFI. Thank you very much for listening to this podcast. Please remember to like, share, comment in the section below, and to subscribe and to send this podcast to your friends. But as for now, that's all we have time for. Alex needs to go and submit his application to be Archbishop. But until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Bye-bye.